Samantha Collins had always known some moments could stop your breath, but nothing prepared her for this. You think you can just walk back into my world? Derek Lawson's voice, deep and steady, barely reached her ears over the hum of conversation and clinking glasses in the grand ballroom of the Metropolitan Sports Gala, but it carried the weight of years, of assumptions, of underestimations. She stood near the edge of the balcony overlooking the glittering crowd, emerald dress catching the warm gold light from the crystal chandeliers above, each step deliberate, each glance calculated, a silent symphony of confidence and composure. Her heels clicked softly on the polished marble floor as she maneuvered past groups of agents and athletes, the scent of fresh orchids mingling with subtle traces of cologne and champagne. Across the room, Derek's eyes found her immediately, a familiar pang of surprise etching across his features, jaw slack, posture stiff, as if he hadn't expected to see her not just present, but commanding the space she had once shied from. Samantha's gaze flicked briefly toward him, a faint curve of acknowledgement, before she turned her attention back to Ryan Mitchell, the rival sports agent seated near the VIP table, his expression intrigued, a silent recognition of her composed presence. The past rushed back to her in fragments. The early mornings of training, the whispered doubts, the quiet humiliation of being underestimated. Yet those shadows had no place here, no hold on the woman who now moved with authority, who now owned her story without apology. The music shifted subtly, a classical string quartet blending into the low murmur of conversation, and Samantha's voice carried just enough to be heard. Polite yet charged, a discussion of contracts and opportunities, each word measured, each gesture a subtle claim of space. Derek's internal rhythm faltered, his pulse quickening as he watched interactions he could no longer control. The effortless rapport Samantha shared with Ryan a vivid contrast to the hesitations, the insecurities, the doubts of their shared past. Every glance, every nuanced movement broadcast to Derek the undeniable truth. She had grown, she had adapted, she had transformed, and the man who had once been the axis of her world now felt the gravity of her independence, the silent authority radiating from her. The camera of his mind replayed the countless times he had underestimated her, dismissed her ambitions, failed to recognize the depth of her focus and the strength that had carried her through years of quiet rebuilding. And now, standing at this gala, watching her command attention without striving for it, Derek faced the startling reality that the Samantha he thought he knew had become a force he could no longer contain. And as she exchanged a knowing smile with Ryan, a hint of partnership and potential unfolding, he realized the story was no longer about him. It was about the undeniable presence of a woman who had risen, and the next move, the real reveal, was yet to come. Samantha Collins stepped away from the balcony, her mind tracing the path that had brought her here, each memory a quiet echo of the years she had rebuilt her life brick by brick. She remembered the long hours she spent developing her sports management firm, negotiating contracts, studying athlete performance metrics, and building a reputation that no one could dismiss. The polished wooden floors of the gala reflected her confidence back at her, a reminder of the discipline and precision that had replaced uncertainty and fear. Every interaction with Ryan Mitchell was intentional, a subtle exchange of knowledge and insight, reinforcing not only her competence, but the unspoken acknowledgement of her ascent. Derek Lawson lingered near the center of the room, watching her with a mixture of disbelief and curiosity, noticing how effortlessly she navigated conversations, commanding attention without raising her voice, her presence a magnet for respect and admiration. Samantha allowed herself a fleeting smile, recalling the endless evenings when Derek had overlooked her potential, and she felt a quiet satisfaction, a serene vindication, the kind that did not need to be announced, only observed. As the quartet played a familiar piece, the strings carrying notes that seemed to resonate with the rhythm of her heartbeat, she moved toward the refreshments table, her movements fluid, measured, a dance of poise and grace, each step a testament to the resilience she had cultivated. Derek's gaze followed every gesture, his mind replaying conversations from their past, realizing how much he had underestimated the depth of her ambition, the clarity of her vision, the subtle power she now wielded with effortless ease. Samantha caught a glimpse of her reflection in the mirrored wall behind the champagne fountain, her posture tall, her expression composed, the green of her dress rich under the soft light, and she allowed herself a brief thought of satisfaction, not arrogance, just recognition of the person she had become. Around them, the gala continued, a swirl of elegance and influence. But Samantha moved through it with the quiet authority of someone who had claimed her place, someone whose story was no longer defined by another's perception. Derek could sense the shift, the invisible boundary of power and autonomy that separated them now, the unspoken realization that the Samantha Collins of that moment was entirely her own, a presence that could not be contained or controlled. She paused near the corner where Ryan reviewed a portfolio, offering her insights with ease and precision, his nods of acknowledgement signaling partnership, a shared understanding that was entirely separate from Derek's world. For a few heartbeats, the air seemed to contract, a moment suspended between the past and the present, the memory of being underestimated colliding with the reality of her authority. Samantha's eyes flicked toward Derek again, a subtle, knowing glance that conveyed more than words could, a promise that the night was just beginning and that the story of who she was and what she could command was far from complete, leaving him, and anyone watching, aware that this was only the first chapter of her triumphant return. Samantha Collins moved toward the edge of the grand ballroom, her presence commanding a subtle hush among the crowd as she approached the center where VIPs mingled with the elegance of tailored suits and flowing gowns. Ryan Mitchell had risen to his feet, offering a warm smile and a handshake that carried the unspoken acknowledgement of their collaboration and shared respect, and Samantha returned the gesture with the same quiet confidence that had carried her through years of challenges, the air between them charged with professionalism and mutual recognition. Derek Lawson lingered a few feet away, observing the interaction, the initial shock giving way to a complex swirl of emotions, a mixture of admiration, regret, and the realization that the woman before him was not the same person he had once known. Samantha spoke with clarity and poise, articulating ideas with precision, guiding conversations about upcoming athlete signings and strategic partnerships, her voice calm, yet resonant, filling the room with authority without needing to dominate. Every nod, every subtle acknowledgement from those around her reinforced the truth Derek could no longer ignore. She had claimed her own space, her own power, and no one could diminish her. As the evening progressed, she navigated the gala with grace, moving from table to table, offering insights and thoughtful observations, her laughter a soft counterpoint to the elegant hum of conversation, and Derek could only watch as she effortlessly became the focal point, the center of influence, and the embodiment of a story rewritten by her own determination. The contrast between the past and present was stark, memories of hesitation, uncertainty, and dismissal clashing against the present moment, where Samantha's every gesture radiated competence and assurance. Ryan's presence served as a silent testament to her ascent, not merely as a partner in discussion, but as a reflection of the recognition and respect she had earned, highlighting the invisible yet undeniable transformation Derek now had to acknowledge. Samantha allowed herself a moment to observe Derek from across the room, his posture rigid, eyes fixed on her, a subtle flicker of what might have been hope or realization passing through his expression, yet she said nothing, spoke nothing, her presence alone articulating the narrative of her journey, her resilience, and the power she now wielded. As she stepped onto the balcony to oversee the gala, the warm lights casting soft reflections across her emerald gown, Derek felt the full weight of the shift, the understanding that the woman he had once underestimated had become an unstoppable force of her own making. Samantha's eyes met Ryan's once more, a brief, knowing glance that suggested not only partnership, but a future brimming with possibility, leaving Derek frozen in quiet astonishment and the audience with the undeniable sense that this was only the beginning of a story far larger and more compelling than any they had witnessed so far, a silent victory marked by dignity, autonomy, and the promise of twists yet to come. Samantha Collins stepped into the grand hall once more, her heels clicking softly on the marble floor, each sound punctuating the quiet authority she carried effortlessly, the soft murmur of conversation bending subtly around her presence, as if the room itself acknowledged the shift she had become. The golden light from the chandeliers reflected in the polished surfaces, glinting off the crystal glasses held delicately in the hands of surrounding guests, casting a warm glow that illuminated the subtle strength in her posture, the calm confidence in her gaze, and the quiet power in every movement. Ryan Mitchell stayed at her side, exchanging brief words, a nod, a smile, subtle gestures that underscored their growing professional rapport and mutual respect, while Derek Lawson watched from across the room, caught between astonishment and the faintest flicker of regret, recognizing too late the evolution of someone he had once thought he understood. Samantha paused briefly near a cluster of agents discussing upcoming athlete contracts, offering insight with precision and clarity, her words measured yet impactful, demonstrating a mastery of the game that went beyond charm and into competence that could not be overlooked. The crowd naturally gravitated toward her, seeking her opinion, acknowledging her knowledge, and Derek felt the invisible shift, the unspoken confirmation that she no longer operated within the bounds of his perception or influence. Samantha's mind wandered briefly to the countless hours of preparation, the relentless drive to rebuild her life on her own terms, the careful cultivation of skills, networks, and poise that allowed her to step into this room not as the woman he had underestimated, but as a presence that commanded attention and respect effortlessly. Every laugh she shared, every nod of understanding she offered, carried with it the weight of a journey forged through resilience, patience, and unwavering determination, each subtle movement a testament to the distance she had traveled from doubt to empowerment. Derek's chest tightened as he followed her interactions, realizing the person standing there had been meticulously shaped by her own choices and had flourished beyond his expectations, her independence radiating like a quiet yet unyielding beacon of success. Samantha's glance swept over the room, taking in the subtle acknowledgments from other attendees, the polite bows, the nods, the brief murmurs of approval, each a small affirmation of the reputation she had quietly built and the influence she now wielded without effort or display. She turned to Ryan, suggesting a strategy for an upcoming signing with a clarity that drew attention, not from neediness but from the force of her intellect and poise, and Derek, observing from a distance, could only absorb the reality that the woman he had once known as tentative and overlooked had transformed into an autonomous and formidable presence, and the subtle, fleeting exchange of a knowing look between Samantha and Ryan hinted at future collaborations and opportunities that extended far beyond the gaze of anyone who had doubted her, leaving him, and anyone witnessing, suspended in the realization that her story was still unfolding, her influence expanding, and her ascent far from complete, a quiet victory marked by control, dignity, and the promise of more to come. Samantha Collins lingered at the edge of the ballroom, her gaze sweeping across the crowd one last time, noting the subtle shifts in attention as conversations paused momentarily, the murmur of acknowledgement following in her wake, a silent testament to her presence and the careful cultivation of influence she had achieved. The ambient glow from the chandeliers bathed her emerald dress in soft light, the polished marble reflecting faint streaks of gold as she moved with measured grace toward the balcony, the gentle hum of orchestral strings blending with the distant clink of glasses creating a rhythm that mirrored her composed heartbeat. Ryan Mitchell followed slightly behind, his brief words of encouragement a quiet acknowledgement of the partnership forming between them, a shared understanding that was professional, respectful, and unassailably poised. Derek Lawson stood frozen near the center of the room, jaw slightly dropped, eyes tracing her movements as if trying to decipher a story he no longer controlled. Every gesture from Samantha a reminder of her self-determination, every subtle smile toward Ryan a signal of her confidence and competence, and he felt the invisible boundary of her autonomy pressing against the memory of the woman he once thought he knew. Samantha's mind was calm, her thoughts focused on the strategic conversations she had conducted, the proposals discussed, and the agreements subtly influenced by her presence, each interaction reinforcing her position not through force or assertion, but through precision, insight, and quiet authority, the room bending to her influence without acknowledgement of overt power. Derek observed as she approached a small cluster of agents reviewing athlete contracts, offering observations with clarity and insight that drew immediate engagement, her voice resonant, articulate, and unshakable, a stark contrast to the tentative woman he remembered from years past. The room seemed to pause as she interacted, not out of deference, but because the substance and authenticity she carried commanded natural attention, an unspoken acknowledgement of her journey from doubt and underestimation to undeniable presence and impact. Samantha allowed herself a brief reflection, recalling the countless hours of preparation, the strategic patience, the deliberate building of networks and credibility that enabled this moment, each detail a quiet victory over the misperceptions that had once constrained her. As she stood at the balcony, overlooking the gala one final time for the evening, Derek remained rooted, processing the evolution he was witnessing, and Samantha shared a subtle glance with Ryan, a flicker of shared understanding and potential for future collaboration, the night far from over, the story continuing beyond the view of anyone present, leaving Derek, the audience, and the room itself suspended in the quiet recognition that her ascent was ongoing, her influence expanding, and the chapters yet unwritten promised revelations and triumphs that would unfold in time, her silent authority and dignity marking the culmination of her journey thus far while hinting at even greater transformations to come. Samantha Collins stepped away from the balcony and returned to the center of the gala, her eyes scanning the room with calm precision, taking in every interaction, every subtle gesture among the crowd, the crystal chandeliers reflecting a warm glow across her emerald dress and casting a soft light that made her presence feel simultaneously commanding and approachable. She approached a group of agents discussing upcoming athlete contracts, offering insights and suggestions with confidence, her words clear, deliberate, and weighted with authority, each sentence delivered with the ease of someone who had meticulously mastered her craft and her space. Derek Lawson observed from a distance, his expression a complex mix of admiration and disbelief, realizing with every word she spoke that the woman before him was no longer defined by his past perceptions, nor by the insecurities and doubts that had once constrained her. Samantha's attention briefly shifted to Ryan Mitchell, whose subtle nod of acknowledgement and attentive posture reflected a shared understanding, a silent confirmation of her influence and the respect she had earned without fanfare or assertion. Around them, the gala continued its rhythm of soft laughter, clinking glasses, and polite conversation. Yet Samantha's presence subtly reoriented the energy of the room, drawing attention naturally, compelling acknowledgement through competence and composure rather than force. Memories of past challenges flashed through her mind briefly, the long hours of preparation, the careful cultivation of skills and relationships, and the countless small victories that had accumulated into this moment, a quiet triumph expressed through poise and mastery rather than spectacle. Derek could not look away, witnessing not just her transformation but the way she effortlessly navigated influence, commanding focus without demanding it, every interaction reinforcing the undeniable truth of her independence and capability. Samantha allowed a moment to observe Derek, a subtle glance carrying neither malice nor triumph, merely the serene confidence of someone who had claimed their rightful place and recognized their own worth, a silent acknowledgement that the story was hers alone and entirely self-directed. She moved toward the refreshments table, the soft swish of her dress accompanying the gentle notes of the string quartet, as her gestures and expressions radiated control and authority, drawing others into conversation with ease and sophistication, demonstrating not only mastery of her domain, but the grace of someone who understood the power of quiet influence. Derek, standing across the room, felt the finality of the shift, the realization that the woman he had underestimated had become fully autonomous, her presence marking a new equilibrium in the space they once shared, and Samantha's subtle smile in Ryan's direction hinted at collaborative futures and possibilities that extended far beyond Derek's comprehension, leaving him and any observers suspended in the knowledge that her ascent was continuous, her influence expanding, and her narrative still unfolding with elegance, authority, and the promise of revelations yet to come. Samantha Collins paused near the balcony, the gentle hum of conversation and the soft clinking of glasses forming a backdrop to the quiet authority she radiated, her posture straight, shoulders relaxed, yet every movement calculated with purpose, the emerald fabric of her gown catching and refracting the warm light from the crystal chandeliers above, creating a subtle halo around her that seemed to draw the room's attention naturally. Derek Lawson remained a few steps behind, frozen in observation, each gesture of Samantha's precision reminding him of how far she had come. The contrast between the tentative woman he once knew and the composed, confident presence before him undeniable and impossible to ignore. She glanced briefly at Ryan Mitchell, his subtle smile acknowledging their shared understanding, a silent reinforcement of the influence she had cultivated, then turned her attention to the clusters of guests around the room, engaging in discussions about athlete contracts and upcoming opportunities with clarity and insight that commanded attention effortlessly, every word measured, every suggestion articulated with both authority and grace. The ambient music shifted slightly, a melodic undertone accentuating the elegance of the gathering, and Samantha moved fluidly through the room, her presence creating pockets of natural focus, her interactions thoughtful, her observations sharp, leaving those she spoke with aware of her competence and ability without the need for embellishment or display. Derek's eyes followed her closely, the realization settling in that the woman he had underestimated had entirely redefined herself, her identity and her influence now fully independent of his perception or his past judgments. And each smile, nod, and subtle glance she shared with Ryan reinforced the quiet power she wielded. The soft lighting highlighted her features, the gentle reflections of the polished floor capturing the rhythm of her movement, and Samantha allowed herself a brief internal acknowledgement of the journey that had brought her here, the challenges overcome, the careful steps taken to build networks, knowledge, and confidence, all culminating in this demonstration of poised authority. Derek remained in the periphery, absorbing the scene, noting how effortlessly Samantha had transformed the room's energy, her presence no longer defined by past perceptions, but by her own command, and every subtle interaction, every shared insight, every calm, controlled movement communicated a story of resilience, intelligence, and self-determination. Samantha's eyes swept across the room once more, noting the respect, acknowledgement, and engagement she elicited, her glance returning to Derek briefly, carrying no accusation, no triumph, only the serene confidence of someone who had fully embraced her place, her journey, and her capability, a quiet yet powerful declaration that the narrative she authored was entirely her own, leaving the audience, Derek, and the room itself suspended in the awareness that this chapter of her story was only part of an ongoing ascent, with future revelations and accomplishments waiting just beyond the present. Samantha Collins moved through the crowd with fluid assurance, each step measured, her eyes scanning for opportunity and connection, the soft clatter of crystal glasses and low murmur of conversation framing her deliberate presence, while the golden glow from the chandeliers above highlighted the subtle confidence in her posture, the elegant lines of her emerald gown, and the calm authority in her movements that drew glances without effort. Ryan Mitchell stayed close, offering quiet acknowledgement with a nod or brief smile as she engaged with key figures in discussions about athlete contracts and future partnerships, her words crisp, insightful, and full of clarity that commanded respect without needing to dominate, her intellect and poise radiating in a way that made even the most experienced agents take notice. Derek Lawson lingered in the periphery, jaw slightly dropped, heart racing with a combination of disbelief and reluctant admiration, realizing with each passing moment that the woman before him was not simply empowered, but had become a force of influence and authority entirely independent of his past assumptions, her trajectory no longer tethered to his perception or presence. Samantha allowed herself a brief internal reflection on the careful work that had led her here, the late nights reviewing contracts, the hours spent building a network of allies and mentors, the persistent dedication to her craft, each small success adding to a cumulative presence that now commanded the room effortlessly. She moved to a table where a group of executives debated the next steps for an emerging athlete, offering insight with quiet authority, her voice carrying across the discussion with a balance of warmth and precision that drew attention naturally, reinforcing her command of expertise and influence. Derek watched every interaction, noting how effortlessly she guided conversations, how each gesture and word drew people toward collaboration rather than deference, how her quiet confidence filled the room without demanding recognition. Samantha's gaze met Ryan's briefly, a subtle glance that carried acknowledgement, mutual understanding, and the promise of ongoing collaboration, then shifted to Derek for a fleeting moment, conveying no triumph, no challenge, just the serene recognition of her own power and the unassailable truth of the journey she had undertaken. Around them, the gala continued, the music, laughter, and conversations flowing like a river through the space. Yet Samantha's presence shaped the current, influencing direction and focus without intrusion, a silent assertion of her evolution and status. Derek stood motionless, absorbing the reality that she had transformed completely, her influence extending far beyond his comprehension or control. And as Samantha moved toward the balcony to take in the room one final time, her expression remained composed, her mind alert, her posture the perfect blend of elegance and command, leaving the audience, Derek, and the room itself suspended in awareness that her story was far from over, that her ascent continued beyond the present, and that the chapters yet to unfold would reflect the full measure of her autonomy, capability, and quiet, unyielding authority. Samantha Collins adjusted the angle of her posture as she moved toward the center of the ballroom, her gaze sweeping the gathering with subtle authority, each motion deliberate, measured, radiating confidence without demanding attention, the emerald sheen of her dress catching the soft light from the towering chandeliers and reflecting across the polished marble floor in delicate streaks that seemed to follow her progress through the room. Derek Lawson remained in the periphery, his expression a complex mix of awe and incredulity, the cadence of his breathing quickening as he observed her interaction with Ryan Mitchell, who responded to her suggestions with concise nods, subtle smiles, and a quiet attentiveness that underscored the respect Samantha had earned effortlessly through competence and poise. The ambient hum of conversation mingled with the faint strains of a string quartet, forming a rhythmic backdrop to Samantha's fluid movements, her words carrying clear, authoritative insight as she engaged with various guests, sharing observations about athlete signings and strategic initiatives with a tone that was both measured and compelling, ensuring her influence was felt without overt assertion. Memories of her past, the moments of hesitation, the quiet doubts imposed by others, briefly flickered in her mind, reminding her of the journey that had shaped this composed, unshakable presence. Yet those reflections only reinforced the calm clarity of her actions in the present. Derek's attention was drawn to the way she commanded attention through substance rather than spectacle, each interaction a precise balance of intelligence, tact, and self-assurance, leaving those around her naturally engaged and responsive, their acknowledgement a silent tribute to her evolution. Samantha allowed herself a subtle internal smile, recognizing the quiet victories embedded in these moments. The hours of preparation, the disciplined cultivation of her professional and personal presence, the unwavering dedication that had led to the room bending subtly to her influence, acknowledging her authority without confrontation or force. Her glance returned briefly to Derek, not challenging, not triumphing, merely affirming the distance she had traversed, the autonomy she now embodied, and the clarity of self-possession that had become second nature. And then she turned seamlessly back to Ryan, exchanging a brief nod that conveyed alignment, understanding, and the promise of future collaboration, all while the gathering continued around them. The soft murmur of conversation and laughter forming a gentle, continuous backdrop that highlighted rather than diminished her presence. Every gesture, every careful word, every interaction reinforced the image of a woman whose competence and composure had replaced uncertainty with quiet authority, whose trajectory had shifted from being defined by others to fully self-directed, leaving Derek and any observer acutely aware that this chapter of her story was only a waypoint, a demonstration of her resilience, and a prelude to further accomplishments, influence, and recognition that awaited beyond the room, the gala, and the evening itself, with Samantha moving through the space as both participant and orchestrator of her narrative, poised, assured, and wholly in command of her journey. Samantha Collins paused at the edge of the ballroom, the soft murmur of conversation swirling around her like a gentle tide, the warm light from the crystal chandeliers casting a golden halo across her emerald gown, highlighting the calm authority she carried effortlessly as she observed the room with precise awareness. Derek Lawson remained frozen a few feet away, the astonishment in his eyes tempered by a slow realization that the woman before him had become entirely her own force, her presence commanding attention through substance, poise, and quiet confidence rather than any overt display. Samantha's focus shifted seamlessly to Ryan Mitchell, who acknowledged her insight with a subtle nod, and together they engaged in a brief, strategic exchange, their body language conveying trust, mutual respect, and an unspoken understanding of shared objectives without drawing unnecessary attention, while Derek watched every interaction with a mixture of disbelief and reluctant admiration, noting how naturally she drew respect from others around her. As she moved toward the center of the room again, her gait deliberate and composed, she intercepted a conversation between a group of influential agents, offering measured observations and insights that commanded attention not through dominance, but through clarity and competence, her voice carrying a calm resonance that drew listeners toward collaboration and engagement. The hum of conversation, punctuated by soft laughter and the clink of glasses, formed a gentle backdrop to Samantha's deliberate presence, every movement and gesture radiating an aura of control and self-assuredness that contrasted starkly with the tentative figure Derek remembered from the past. Samantha allowed herself a brief reflection, acknowledging the journey that had led her to this moment, the long nights of preparation, careful cultivation of professional relationships, and persistent development of her expertise, all culminating in a graceful assertion of authority and influence. Derek's gaze lingered, drawn to the fluidity and precision with which she navigated the room, the way each interaction subtly reinforced her competence and autonomy, a quiet testament to resilience and strategy. Samantha's glance swept the ballroom, capturing subtle nods of respect and attention from key figures, and her eyes met Derek's for a brief heartbeat, conveying neither triumph nor reproach, only the serene awareness of her own evolution and the unassailable confidence that came from mastery of her environment. She returned her attention to Ryan, offering one last succinct recommendation regarding an athlete contract, their exchange brief but layered with shared understanding and forward-looking intent, reinforcing the unspoken narrative of her ascent. The gala continued around them, the orchestra's strings blending with soft chatter and laughter, yet Samantha's presence remained a steady point of influence, a quiet gravitational center that shaped interactions and attention without overt assertion. Derek, rooted in realization, understood that her growth and autonomy were complete, that she had redefined her place in the world on her own terms. And as Samantha moved toward the balcony for a final overview of the room, her expression remained calm, controlled, and commanding, leaving both Derek and the audience with a sense of anticipation, the understanding that her story was far from finished and that her ascent, influence, and quiet power would continue to unfold in ways both remarkable and inevitable. Samantha Collins stepped forward into the center of the gala with unwavering poise, the soft glimmer of the chandeliers reflecting in the polished marble beneath her feet, casting a warm glow across her emerald dress, each movement deliberate, her presence commanding attention without a word, the quiet authority she radiated drawing subtle nods and polite acknowledgments from the surrounding crowd. Derek Lawson remained frozen nearby, eyes fixed on her, jaw slightly slack, absorbing each interaction with a mix of astonishment and reluctant admiration, realizing the depth of transformation she had undergone and the autonomy she now possessed, her influence extending through the room in ways he had never anticipated. Samantha moved toward Ryan Mitchell with a composed smile, exchanging brief words that carried both clarity and mutual understanding, each gesture reinforcing her command over the space and the subtle network she had cultivated, demonstrating expertise without the need for overt assertion, her confidence evident in the way guests naturally deferred to her insights. Around them, the orchestra continued its soft cadence, the hum of conversation punctuated by occasional laughter and the gentle clinking of glasses, yet Samantha's presence subtly shaped the flow of attention, drawing people toward her. Through competence and composure, her aura of assurance palpable and magnetic. She paused near a group discussing upcoming athlete contracts, offering pointed observations and strategic suggestions with calm authority, her words resonating clearly, eliciting nods of agreement and thoughtful consideration, each interaction further cementing the quiet power she now wielded. Derek's focus remained unbroken, his mind replaying past memories, the countless moments he had underestimated her, the times he had failed to recognize her potential, each reflection now juxtaposed against the undeniable reality of her current presence, her mastery of influence and interaction creating a quiet tension he could neither dismiss nor alter. Samantha allowed herself a moment to breathe in the energy of the room, the subtle acknowledgments and recognition of her efforts settling around her like a quiet affirmation, a reward for years of diligence, resilience, and strategic self-cultivation, the room bending naturally to her competence rather than her demand. Her gaze drifted toward Derek for an imperceptible instant, a glance neither confrontational nor celebratory, merely an acknowledgement of the distance she had traversed and the person she had become, before returning to her strategic engagement with Ryan, planning next steps and potential collaborations with ease and elegance. The ambient lighting and soft orchestra underscored the serenity and control she maintained, each gesture deliberate, each conversation meaningful, the flow of attention around her subtly redirected, a testament to the careful crafting of her presence and the mastery of her narrative. Derek, caught in observation, could only acknowledge silently the quiet yet undeniable authority she now possessed, the total independence and influence she exercised in a space he once assumed he controlled, leaving both him and anyone observing suspended in the recognition that Samantha's story was far from complete, her ascent ongoing, her impact tangible, and her narrative firmly in her own hands, promising further revelations and achievements yet to unfold in the chapters still to come. Samantha Collins stepped onto the balcony at the far end of the ballroom, her gaze sweeping the entire room, the soft hum of conversation blending with the gentle notes of the string quartet, the golden light of the chandeliers reflecting off the polished marble and casting an ethereal glow across her emerald gown, highlighting the effortless authority she exuded. Derek Lawson remained near the center, frozen in place, his eyes tracing every deliberate movement she made, the stark contrast between the confident, composed woman before him and the hesitant, uncertain figure of the past impossible to ignore. Samantha allowed herself a brief moment to observe the subtle acknowledgments from those around her, the polite nods, the slight smiles, the attentive glances that reflected recognition of her competence and presence, and she felt a quiet satisfaction, a serene awareness of the journey that had brought her to this point, the years of preparation, strategic decisions, and persistent dedication culminating in a moment of unspoken triumph. Ryan Mitchell stepped closer, his subtle gestures and attentive posture reinforcing their silent collaboration and mutual understanding, the quiet connection between them evident without drawing attention, a partnership based on respect, shared objectives, and recognition of Samantha's capabilities. She moved fluidly back toward the crowd, engaging briefly with a cluster of agents and executives, offering insights and observations that were met with thoughtful nods and engaged attention, each interaction reinforcing her command of the space, the depth of her knowledge, and the precision of her communication, all delivered with the calm assurance of someone who had earned her place through merit and persistence. Derek's eyes followed her every step, a mixture of astonishment and reluctant respect rising within him as he realized the extent of her transformation, the autonomy and authority she now wielded fully independent of any influence he had once held over her presence shaping the energy of the room and drawing acknowledgement naturally through competence, poise, and grace. Samantha's glance returned briefly toward Derek, a fleeting, subtle acknowledgement, neither confrontational nor celebratory, a quiet recognition of the past juxtaposed against the reality of her present strength and unassailable composure, before she shifted her attention back to Ryan, discussing upcoming strategic opportunities with precise clarity, their collaboration flowing seamlessly and naturally, the room bending around their combined presence. The ambient light and sound accentuated her poise, each movement measured, deliberate, and radiating assurance, her interactions leaving the audience, Derek, and every observer aware that she had fully claimed her narrative, her journey, and her influence, and that the ascent she had undertaken was far from complete. The chapters still to unfold, promising further accomplishments, recognition, and the quiet, commanding power of a woman entirely in control of her destiny. Samantha Collins stood at the balcony one final time, the full grandeur of the ballroom laid out before her, the warm glow of the chandeliers casting long reflections across the polished marble floor and highlighting every subtle detail of her emerald gown, each fold and shimmer marking the culmination of a carefully curated presence. Derek Lawson lingered near the edge of the room, frozen, eyes following her movements, the quiet strength, calm composure, and effortless authority she radiated, leaving him speechless, the years of underestimations and misjudgments pressing silently against him as he observed the woman who had once been defined by his perceptions now commanding the space entirely on her own terms. Samantha allowed herself a brief moment to take in the gentle nods, subtle smiles, and attentive glances of the surrounding guests, the recognition of her competence and poise resonating without need for assertion or claim, a quiet yet undeniable triumph that needed no words. Ryan Mitchell stood nearby, acknowledging her insight and presence with the professional subtlety of someone who recognized not only her capabilities but the calculated confidence she carried in every gesture and interaction, a partnership evident in the smallest of exchanges, reinforcing both authority and mutual respect. Samantha moved fluidly back toward the center of the room, engaging once more with clusters of agents and executives, offering precise recommendations and observations with calm clarity, each word resonating with thoughtful impact, each interaction further solidifying the quiet command she exercised over the environment without demanding attention. Derek's eyes followed every movement, every nod, every careful word, recognizing the transformation not as a simple change of style or appearance, but as a profound evolution in confidence, autonomy, and influence, the subtle gravity of her presence impossible to dismiss. Samantha allowed her gaze to sweep the room one last time, noting the subtle acknowledgement from colleagues, the quiet attention from peers, and the natural deference her presence inspired, all without a single overt display. Her authority communicated entirely through competence, composure, and self-assured elegance. She shared a brief, knowing glance with Ryan, one that carried the unspoken acknowledgement of partnership, shared vision, and the path ahead, before allowing her eyes to rest momentarily on Derek, a glance neither triumphant nor scornful but serene, an affirmation of her journey and the unassailable power she now held over her own narrative. The music of the quartet, the soft hum of conversation, and the ambient reflections of light formed a gentle backdrop to her presence, accentuating the quiet mastery and the poise she exuded as she prepared to step away from the balcony and continue her trajectory. The story of her ascent far from complete, yet marked by dignity, influence, and the subtle, commanding authority of a woman who had fully claimed her space, leaving Derek and every observer suspended in the awareness that her journey would continue to unfold, revealing further triumphs, opportunities, and the lasting imprint of her quiet but undeniable power.